Thank you for joining us for another episode of That Solo Life, the podcast for PR pros and marketers who work for themselves. I am Michelle Kane. My company is Voice Matters. I am here as ever with my wonderful co-host, Karen Swim of Solo PR Pro. Hi, Karen. How are you today?
Hey, Michelle, I'm great. How are you? We're
Good.
so excited because this is the first time that we've actually streamed live on YouTube. And in typical Michelle and Karen fashion, we didn't actually tell anybody in advance that we were going live, but we will do that moving forward. If you have managed to happen upon us live, great, welcome. Otherwise, for those of you who will be listening or watching the podcast later, thank you for joining us
Yes.
here as well.
Yes, yes. And today, we thought we'd just check in on some current events out there. Um, Especially, the PRO Act just passed the House. And I know we've touched on that in the past, just, as something to keep an eye on, especially as it relates to the whole AB5 situation in California. Um, because it could affect how we as solos are viewed, not necessarily that we fall into the same category as, say, an Uber driver. And this is also to say that, there's a lot of good in the act and a lot of good protections. But I think the main essence of the ABC test element that would affect us is you guys don't understand how we work.
Yeah, I mean, and sort of to reframe this, so in
Yeah.
2019,
Yeah.
AB5 California passed. And so AB5 was an assembly bill. And what it did is it sought to really fight against misclassification.
Right.
That's not a terrible thing, but it is a
No.
terrible thing when you are lumping, different types of people who work independently together. So
Yeah.
somebody who's a solo PR pro may have a very different view of independence than somebody who is an app delivery driver. And it created a lot of problems outside of California because
Right.
California companies then feared being, non-compliant, and so they stopped using contractors, which is a
Yeah.
terrible thing. So, but it not only affected, it had all of these provisions in there, like it limited writers to like 10 articles, I think, a year with a publication. We all know journalists who write 5 stories a day for a publication. So that
Right.
really limited their income amount. It really harmed
Yeah.
theater actors. It hurt live theater. It hurt a lot of people. And so then last year, Prop 22 was really sought to, and this is all in California, but what happens in
Yeah.
California often spreads to the rest of the country. And so we want you to be aware of this because of
Right.
look-alike legislation. So Prop
Yeah.
22 sort of the fight back, like AB5 is terrible. Let's, introduce something. But what many are saying is that rather they would have really liked to have seen AB5 completely repealed.
Mm.
So Prop 22 did some things. It had some things in there like guaranteed minimum earnings. It had a stipend for health insurance. It had medical coverage for on-the-job injuries, and it provided some protections against discrimination and sexual harassment. I think there was also some reimbursement
Mm.
for mileage. You know, again, all of those things sound kind of okay,
Right.
but really, when you are somebody who works and you consider yourself to be a business, you really have to think about it not only from the perspective of you controlling your business, but then you hiring contractors. Because let's remember, a lot of
Mhm.
solos also do that.
Sure.
So it's all
Sure.
very complicated. Now, AB5 did have a B2B exception if
Yeah.
you meet 13 tests. Basically, what we're seeing is that there is, as Michelle said, there's just this big ball of confusion. To me,
Yeah.
the whole thing is a mess. And there's just too many different standards in states to keep up with. And there needs to be a simplified system for categorizing who's really an independent and who's not. And the PRO Act, let's just be really clear, is really pro union. That's
Yes.
about the unions.
Right.
Union, unfortunately, also often means anti-independent, and so that
Mm,
works against us. And so
mhm.
it is very important, very important. We are urging you to get up to speed on these bills,
Yeah.
whether or not you live in California. You need to understand what's going on. Right now, there are some other bills in the California Assembly, SB 805 and AB 1227. Those very specifically are kind of trying to carve theaters out of these bills and give them protection so
Good.
that they can get back up to speed quickly after the pandemic.
Yeah.
That's not carving stuff out, only adds to the confusion. So
Yeah.
understand what these bills are, understand how they threaten our ability to do what we do. And again, it's not because maybe you are a corporation, maybe you are an LLC, maybe you have an S corp, maybe you're a C corp. But bottom line is, these things really do impinge upon our freedom to
Right.
run our businesses. We don't want to be lumped in. Most importantly, you don't want your potential clients to fear hiring
Exactly.
solos because it's just a convoluted mess.
Right.
So
Exactly.
understand, advocate, write your local lawmakers, please
Yeah.
get involved, go online, lend your voice to the conversation. When there are public comment periods, comment, please comment,
Mhm.
share it, educate other people, because it's going to be apparently up to us to educate, our policymakers on what these bills all really mean.
Right. Right. I mean, it's America. There's talk of, do your own thing and all this, but when you lump us in, you know, and like you say, people's perception is reality. So the companies that might be hiring us are just gonna not going to, but they very well may just say, I don't want to get there, and do you really want to be screaming, at the outset of a relationship with a client, I'm a C corp, I'm an S corp,
Yeah.
do you, it's like, it just complicates things so much. And I know there are so many of us out there, and work is trending that way, which is partly why this has come up. But to me, it's two different segments. I mean, yes, there are places that want to unionize and should, but there's the rest of us. Hey, it's just me and some subcontractors. Really? That's never going to happen. So let us just do our thing. Yeah,
And we
it's so
have
it's
our awesome buddy, Chip Griffin. We love Chip. You guys, he does a live show. He's really the master, and he's one of the people who's really kind of mentored us and inspired us to take some risk and go live and to do things. Chip and Jason Ball. So thank you both for paving the way for educating us and helping us. Chip is saying that even though it pains him to do so, that he cautions agency owners, because this is his, wheelhouse. He works with agency owners to
right.
carefully consider, whether or not they subcontract to solos because of the risk. And that's real. I mean, and
Yeah,
so you guys, and Chip is not an advocate. He thinks that ABC and AB5 get an F. And I would agree with that. It's
yeah,
just a mess. But I think, and I do think it's up to us, because let's face it, lawmakers don't know how rural people live, period. And
no,
they certainly don't understand our world and how we work,
right.
and that we truly we want to be in business. We understand all those things. I don't need someone fighting
Exactly.
benefits for me. I can provide my own benefits. I would love it if the government made it a little bit easier for all of us to access affordable, high quality benefits, but
Right.
that's a whole different ball of
A
wax.
whole other conversation. But yeah, as far as, just impinging our means of making a living in the way that we choose. Sorry, isn't that the American dream, guys and
Yeah.
gals? Hello.
I thought it was. You
Unless
know,
I hear about it a lot. I don't know. What do
I
I
hear about
know?
it. I've
Yeah.
read tales. I've seen the tales of it.
But, truly don't discount your voices. When their phones start ringing and their email boxes start getting full, they pay attention. They definitely pay attention.
I
Oh, look,
definitely.
we have a comment. Fabulous. For our podcast listeners, we are again streaming live on YouTube right now. So we just saw our friend Chip chime in and it popped up. So woohoo.
We've also had my sweet fur baby chime in because she's not at daycare today, so she's decided to join the broadcast. So,
Excellent. Excellent. Mine may join because he does not like the separation of my backdrop. It means he can hear me but not see me. This is a major no-no in the work from home household. Anyway.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So don't be afraid to be vocal about that and just, please get up to speed because there is strength in numbers. Speaking of numbers, there was a little interview that got a little attention this week, and
Yeah.
we just like to touch on it just from, kind of a crisis comms perspective of you should be ready for anything and, have the self-awareness as an organization to know what's coming and, maybe take steps to avoid certain things from happening. Of course, we're talking about it's just that thing on Oprah was chatting with some people recently. And okay, come on, everybody. Did you watch the Harry and Meghan interview? Because oh my goodness.
There was a lot of, I'm not a royal watcher by any stretch of the imagination. I usually skip over the articles because I legitimately don't care. But I found myself on Sunday night, like watching, and then I got pulled in and I'm like, wow. So, as communicators, I really do, um, I really do like to look at these situations and say, okay, what are some takeaways? Because
Yeah,
this is obviously a big public rift. But if we strip away all the layers, you have a company, which I guess they call the
the
whole
firm.
the firm. You have a
Sure.
company, and you have people that work for that company, and you have people, leadership making decisions that maybe the senior leadership is not necessarily aware of. And that makes sense because that's how companies run. You can't have senior leadership involved in all of the micro decisions.
Yeah.
However, this comes back to what I always teach is that you do need to have a very clearly defined and articulated vision, mission, and values for your company. Those are the things that allow you to set an ethical foundation, and those should be tested, they should be checked, they should be repeated. And they need to be repeated. My phrase is from the basement to the boardroom.
Hmm.
Clearly, in this case, there were not a unifying set of principles, and there was some disconnect.
Right.
And people were not treated equitably, and things were done that maybe senior leadership wasn't aware of. Eventually that's going to erupt. I mean, again, take away, the fact that you're talking about a prince and whatever you feel about, the monarchy and all of that, and just think of it in terms of if this happened in America and it was a corporation and people had parted from a company because of issues, because you felt like you weren't heard, you didn't have a voice. These are all things that could very happen, and they do very frequently.
Yep.
So as communicators, what do we do? How do we guard against that?
Exactly. And I always used to say, well, I still say, I don't have to know everything, but I have to know everything. Comms people should have a seat at the senior table just because often we're to quote Billy Bragg, the little black cloud in a dress.
Yeah.
Just saying like, hey, not to be a downer here, but let's troubleshoot this, and not to do that with everything, of course, but only when, your PR senses start tingling of just like, this could go sideways in several ways. So let's either not do it or be prepared. Let's prepare in case these situations come up because we think this is still okay to go forward with. And, you know, just have some corporate self-awareness. There's personal self-awareness, but I think organizations need to have self-awareness as well. And, we've seen this in a myriad of ways lately. Check in with the times. what is currently acceptable and not acceptable as our culture evolves and progresses. You know,
I was also really interested in the disconnected media strategy. So apparently there was a media strategy to answer to make public statements for some people to correct errors. And so again, I think that it's really important that as you're helping companies and you're doing your strategic plans and you're putting things in place, that you have very clearly outlined media policies.
right,
Some of this gets covered in your crisis communications plan, where you have very strict protocols. But it's equally important, when I work with companies, and sometimes they're huge and there's different divisions, there are written protocols in what gets a press release. Because when you're
right,
dealing with large organizations, you can have a barrage. Everybody wants their press release, and it doesn't make sense.
right,
These are like all the components of working with complex organizations that you really need to think through. When do we respond to the media? Do we correct errors regardless? Is there some threshold of error that we adhere to? Because if you don't have that very clearly delineated, what can happen is that now there is an inequitable process that not everybody benefits from, and it can lead to dissatisfaction, as it did, and people departing the company in a way that reflects poorly on your institution.
right, right. The chess move that was made by whatever element of the firm prior, the story coming out about, Megan bullying her staff allegedly, and well, HR is going to look at this. And I thought, oh boy, I bet you wish you could take that back because,
Yeah.
the revelations in that interview just made that fall flat. So, not saying that is that we're going to have those situations come upon us because clearly we are, most of us in our line of work, we're dealing with journalists, not tabloids, unless you're a celebrity publicist on a certain level, but most of us are not doing that kind of work. So thankfully, we don't have to worry too much about that, but it does make you think, be careful what you put out there if you know it is not completely, and they had to know that that was not completely, you know, bulletproof. Uh, that was
Yeah.
quite a risk. I thought, oh, that didn't age well. And yeah,
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I love, and it wasn't news to me, is that it really did ignite this conversation about, bias,
yeah,
um,
oh,
in, in
absolutely,
terms of bias with the media and how they handled Megan. And we've known that all along. And we've
yeah,
known that in spite of their lovely accents, that, Brits are not free of racism. It,
right,
it exists in all parts of the world. And so some of the conversations are a little ugly, but I'm glad that we are continuing to have these
yeah,
opportunities to
yeah,
confront these things and to pull it apart and to look
yeah,
at it, reflect on
yeah,
how we report on things and how we discuss things, how we talk about
yes.
things and who we
Oh
target.
my
Because
gosh, yes.
really,
I mean,
again, whatever you think about royals and
yeah,
royal life, um, she was treated unfairly.
incredibly, yeah. And just a comment, when you make Oprah speechless, the
Yeah,
comment about the child's skin color, I thought, who, what? Come
yeah,
on, come
that was
on,
horrible.
gobsmacking, yeah, yeah, oh yeah,
Pretty awful. The
yeah,
press running around stories. I mean, and again,
yeah,
we've seen smaller. I have. I'm sure Michelle, you have in our work. We've
uh,
seen smaller elements of this. We've all had to deal with clients
yep,
being misrepresented in the media,
yes,
either purposely because, you know, journalists are people too. Sometimes
mhm,
there's a journalist that has a bone to pick. They're a little
yeah,
vindictive. It has happened. I'm not saying this about all reporters, most of
no,
which I think are ethical and lovely, but occasionally, but they're human beings,
yeah,
and I have
we are,
there there are solos that can share personal experiences where someone had an axe to grind and they chose to grind it using their job.
in that
Um,
direction, Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've had to deal with these things. And I think that I agree that sometimes you don't address it because it amplifies it. But again, this is where your experts come into play, giving you the right advice in proportion to the situation. Because just as we don't answer every troll on social media, sometimes it requires a response. Sometimes it requires a strategy to
Yeah.
combat that misinformation.
Yeah.
I think that that's really important to determine, and sometimes you don't have to address it. We've told clients these days, especially in this environment, that
Yeah.
every negative comment doesn't deserve a response
No,
because
there are too many,
there's too many.
unfortunately.
And
Yeah.
and quite frankly, in the climate that we're living in the United States right now, you could
Yeah.
say that, "Oh my God, the sky is blue," and somebody would say, "I hate you. It's not blue."
Someone will bring up chemtrails. You're just like,
Yeah,
I just said it was
yeah.
blue. I don't want to go there.
I have
Yeah,
to visit
it's
it one day. Someone said to me, and I'm
it's
like,
so true though, and
"Oh, you're
I think
kidding me right now."
if you just keep truth as your North Star, and, I thought, what Prince Harry said was very telling, that sometimes his grandmother does not get good advice. And, I
God,
think they had a
I
wonderful.
don't have anybody say that about one of my clients. I really do. I hope that never happens.
Right, right, right. You don't want to have that said.
Yeah,
Um, it's just that whole specific situation. The firm, that company had an incredible opportunity, especially since, as it seems, if you take what he said, they operate from a position of fear and, of wanting to stay relevant, to stay in existence, that you would embrace this new 21st century couple and move forward with it. I mean, it was exciting. Oh, great. What's going to come of this? This is wonderful. And no, no,
yeah.
no. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
all right then.
I mean, honestly, the whole thing made me so sad. And
Yeah.
it made me sad that we sometimes forget. And I see this happen all the time. People forget that we're human. And someone commented because I
Yeah.
shared, that I'd gotten an email from someone and they basically told me I suck. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, hello, Monday. Here we
Have a
are.
nice day.
Opinion. I suck. I'm horrible. All right.
All right.
Um, so I think that it's really unfortunate in this climate that we've created, and social media has certainly amplified that
Yeah.
people really are quite comfortable in being hateful. And I,
Yeah.
I do believe that they forget that on the other side of that social media channel, on the other side of that, publication, there's actually a human being. And as human beings, I saw some really troubling things that said, boohoo for Meghan Markle because
Oh,
she is famous. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if
yeah.
you're a successful business owner. It doesn't
No.
matter if you're an attractive person. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if you're wealthy. It doesn't matter if you have a platform and have achieved some prominence. That
Yeah.
doesn't take away from you being a human being who has real feelings,
Yeah.
real families that are attached to
Exactly.
you, and that you can be harmed by those things. And we never, here's a great takeaway. None of us can ever know anyone else's mental state and
That's
how
right.
much a harmful remark could truly send them over the
Yeah.
edge.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. You just don't know. And, you
Yeah.
know, I've long been a follower of, the entertainment industry and just, being a fan
Yeah.
of that, world, whatever. But, and you could see it in, people as they grow in their career and once they hit some success, all of a sudden it, people start treating them differently as far as they're not humans, oh, entertainers can't have opinions. Don't comment on this. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Did we wave a magic wand when they, hit a certain box office level that they're no longer a person? They're a citizen like we are. granted, they may not have to worry about paying the rent this month, but they probably also lived on popcorn in a hovel, which thank God I've never had to.
Yeah,
We all make our compromises. Anyway, all that to say, it's like they're still people.
they're still
I mean, you,
people.
you have that small percentage of divas, but for the most part, I'm like, just treat them like a person. Why are we? It's the tall poppy syndrome. It's the insecurity. It makes we're all human, and I think the trolls out there just makes them feel better about themselves. And
Yeah.
I don't know. In my old one of my former positions, it was you know, well, if you give someone something to complain about, you've made them happy. So you have helped them.
It's funny. So as we advise clients, I had a situation come up this week where a client wanted to host an event to give voice to a particular group of marginalized people. And, in it, 10 years ago, we might have not thought twice about that. Like, yes,
Right.
let's give these people a forum. Let's, hear their issues and let's address them. But in light of where we live now, it's you have to be super cautious, and I would err on please don't ask people for negative feedback because you will get it, and then you will have this other crisis to deal with on the other side of that. If you
Yes.
ask them for positive stories and you frame it in a different way,
Right.
then you're more likely to have a more successful event. But you definitely don't want to throw something and ask people to like bring your issues unless you're a therapist. If you're a therapist, have at it. But if
Yeah.
you are a brand and you want to survive, please don't, because you're just opening yourself up to a can of worms. And
Yeah.
I mean, in some regards, and this is where as communicators, you really have to read the room. You've
Oh,
got to become so good at that. And,
totally.
the best of us can sometimes miss it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
tap into a network, make sure that you're not the only one making the decision and that you have a
Yes.
representation of different voices because people perceive things differently, they hear things differently, and it's so important to broaden that lens so
Yeah.
that you can do the best that you can to guard against crisis in advance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we hope that this has been a fun conversation for you and just, reminded us all to just check in with ourselves from time to time. And so we would love for you to share this broadcast and thank you to our YouTube audience who has joined us today. Special thanks to Chip who's popped in with some comments that weren't trolly. Oh, and before we go really quickly, we were talking about this off air beforehand, but if you haven't checked out the story of the woman who found a full apartment behind her bathroom mirror in New York, after that, go to the Philadelphia Inquirer and read about the man who lived in Veterans Stadium for 2 years. Those are my fun reading tips for your brain breaks. But
There you
we
go.
so I'm going to go move into Citizens Bank Park right after this. Uh, so we thank you for joining us this week and every week, and we truly hope you're getting something out of this. We do enjoy it, and yeah, let us know what you think positively, please. If you think we stink, that's okay. We can handle it, but give it to yourself. Anyway, until next time. Thanks for joining us on That's All Alive.